Well, this month, groundbreaking new research was launched that further demonstrates the urgent and essential role agriculture must play to advance Africa's development. The book, Africa's Agricultural Renaissance, addresses the paradox between preponderance of hunger in a continent that is well endowed with fertile agricultural land, plenty of fresh water, and a vibrant labor force. As some stats show, close to 60% of arable land in the world is located in Africa, which also has several rivers flowing in all seasons and plenty of underground water. Now, to tell us more about the book, we are now joined by Dr. Ayodele Odusola, a resident representative and director, UNDP Africa Finance Sector Hub. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us and for your time this afternoon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we've heard about the significant impact climate change has on agriculture and food security. So to what extent does the research detailed in this book, and what are your findings in terms of that?
Thank you very much. The major finding there is that if Africa focuses attention on agricultural transformation and development, we will not only be able to be self-sufficient in food production for its population, but also will be able to feed many parts of the world. And essentially, it requires a number of things, particularly increasing agricultural productivity. So we found that for us to really transform agriculture, we must increase it, the level of productivity beyond the current level, which is one of the lowest in the world. And as a result of this, it's really very important for both the government, the private sector, the farming community, and research institutions to really devote a lot of attention on it. With this will help us to really end the era where Africa spent about 62% of its foreign reserve. That is spending about 78 billion annually on food importation, whereas it has what it takes to really provide food for all its citizens and supply food and raw materials to many parts of the world. But essentially, the major finding also is that Africa must really focus in adding value to its primary commodities, because wherever you export your primary commodities to is where the jobs are being created over there. If Africa is able to really increase productivity and process most of its agricultural products and also produce some of the input used in farmland, definitely Africa will be able to have an agro-processing that is as high as 3.7 trillion by 2030, which is, as we speak today, it's more than almost double the current level of gross national product in all African countries. So this is really very important. And for us to do this, it's really very important for us to really transform the farmers from the current way of life, they see agriculture, into seeing agriculture as an entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial endeavor that to be able to make profit, to be able to sustain youth going into agriculture. Because apart from modernization, making sure agriculture is profitable is what is going to really push youth into that particular sector. A sector that is currently having an average age of farmer in Africa above 60%, whereas the youth is more than 60%, those that are 25 years and below. So it's really what we have to do in making sure that we create incentives to really attract youth into the agricultural sector.
Dr. Odusola, I mean, you mentioned, just the prospects that the continent has in terms of the sector, in terms of increasing productivity, as it were, and specifically so. To what extent has COVID-19 hampered on these plans? And also looking at governments themselves in the various countries in the continent, are governments themselves helping this industry find a way in which they can increase productivity productivity in South Africa, we know that there's a lot of work that government could do to make sure that this sector prospers. As an example, and infrastructure development is one of those areas in which it can do so. So to what extent has COVID-19 impacted, just some of the progress that we could be seeing, and also at the same time governments in the various countries?
Thank you very much. It has really impacted the agricultural sector. COVID has really shifted resources away from development issue into addressing public health. So this is one of the major challenges, because agriculture has experienced serious underinvestment and undercapitalization over the past decades. And it has become quite intense under COVID, because resources are now being diverted into making sure public safety and public health are really enhanced. So this is one of the major areas where this thing is affected. And again, don't forget, during the lockdown, particularly in South Africa, access to some of these, transporting some of these input into localities where farm settlements became very difficult. So access to some of this input in the period of COVID really hampered productivity. And don't forget, most of the things we do use in Africa, particularly fertilizers, chemicals, were imported from the rest of outside Africa. It was really one of the major sectors affected, because we couldn't get most of this input from the advanced countries that closed their borders and their ports. So it's really a major setback to the kind of progress we have experienced in the agricultural sector over the past decade. But I strongly think what the government, the private sector, the farming community, the research institutions need to do is, what do we do to really accelerate access issues in the agricultural sector? There are many aspects of access. Access to the market is one of the major things, because many of the farming communities are located in far-to-reach communities. They don't even have access roads. Transporting their goods into the market is a major one. Access to finance. Our commercial banks operate with very high lending rate that cannot be afforded by average farmers. So these are a major thing that we need to do. Access to most of the other input, like improved seedlings, fertilizers, chemicals, and even to land, are major issues that we need to put strategic attention on to enhance agricultural productivity. So these are access issues that become very critical. And one of the major things in Africa is that you realize about 30 to 35% of the goods produced in the farm get bad before they get to the market. So dealing with post-harvest management is one of the major things we need to invest on, not only at the government level, but also in private sector, so that it helps us to preserve some of these produce that are being wasted before they get to the market. So this is really an issue. And also, in almost all the African countries, we need to invest heavily in the issue of irrigation, because it's only 6% of Africa's arable land is irrigated. So it's really an issue. We have to move from 6% to the global average of going to about 30-40% of arable land. So we need to ensure we spend heavily on irrigation, so that we don't depend on rain-fed agriculture alone because of limitation of that. Yeah. So these are the issues which I think are very important for us to enhance the productive capacity of our farmers, and also to be able to ensure that we spend a lot in agricultural corridors. The agricultural corridors is what we have to really use to promote economies of scale of the farming community, so that the youths go into those areas, the inputs are there, the markets are there, the facilities are there, and that's the basis for which we can really enhance the productivity of the sector, with particular focus on the youth.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. That's where we have to leave it for now. Thank you so much. Dr. Ayodele Odusola, Resident Representative and Director, UNDP Africa Finance Sector Hub, of course, talking to us there about the book, Africa's Agricultural Renaissance.